The next section in our complete guide to strength training for endurance athletes is the risks involved with including strength training into a training plan. What are the ways that people can go wrong and actually do themselves a disservice? What are the ways that people might have actually experienced that somewhat common thing in the past where people go, well, everyone's talking about strength training being a performance enhancer, but here I am not actually seeing that. Why would that be the case?
My name is Taren. In my late 20s, I was overweight, unfulfilled, and couldn't even run to the end of the block. Over the following 10 years, I lost 65 pounds racing triathlons, running races, cycling events, and world championships. But eventually, the suffer culture of endurance sports training caught up to me, causing health issues and injuries. Now, my company Motive and I are on a mission to help people live more fulfilling lives by reaching endurance sports goals using healthy methods. We can all kill it on race day without killing our bodies. Let's do it.
Getting into the risks and drawbacks of strength training for endurance athletes, I couldn't not post this picture. If you're listening over podcast, just Google synthol fail. You'll go down a rabbit hole of what synthol is. That is really, really funny. People actually think that this synthol dosing looks good. It doesn't look good, but I couldn't not include that. Just getting though into the risks and drawbacks of including strength training, while I talked all about the science and how good it is for you, there are certainly some risks if things aren't designed well. There are 5 big risks that I see by including strength training and not doing it in such a way that you've thought through it or that it's even endurance sports specific. The first one being reduced energy. This is probably the most common one that endurance athletes experience. This is what happens when they take up strength training and then go, I'm just so beat up from my strength training that I don't feel like going out and doing all of my endurance training. Really, really common. This is one of the first things that people say when they think about, well, I should probably include some strength training because Taren's talking about all this studies and the science about how good it is and all those hashtag gains that I can get, but I just don't feel good. That feeling good is not inherent to the strength training itself. It's inherent to the way the strength training was designed. So don't think that strength training as a whole is just going to lead you to having reduced injury. What we're going to talk about in the next sections and the other videos, if you're watching this video as a clip video, is we're going to talk about how you actually design strength training within your endurance training plan so that it complements and doesn't compete with it. Related to that is the second risk or drawback from including strength training. This one is actually, I would think, very, very legitimate. This is training tired. I've heard a lot about this movement towards being a hybrid athlete where you go and you do a pile of weight training to get really muscular, and then you also go and do a pile of running to be able to do running races. The nature of that muscular strength training is that it's going to break down your body. It's going to create small little muscle tears, little bits of muscle damage so that your body can then, once you consume protein, build itself back up, and it's going to build itself up bigger, better, and stronger. That nature of strength training, of breaking yourself down and then going and running after, is really looking at 2 different things. Breaking yourself down is going to require time where you rest and you recover and you get anabolic. Your body becomes in the building mode. But then going and running is catabolic. It's in the breaking down mode. It's breaking down your fat stores, your glycogen stores, as a last resort, your muscle fibers to actually propel yourself forward. They're doing 2 different things. In addition to that, doing this really big, destructive strength training and then going and running on tired, busted up legs is likely going to result in not just not gaining a lot of muscle, but also increasing the likelihood that you're going to get injured in that running because you're running with really poor form. This training tired thing, I 100% don't believe that it is a good idea. So I'm not calling anyone out for saying that hybrid training is not a thing. I'm just saying that you're really asking a lot of your body to, within the same day or even the same week or even the same month, do 2 things, being build up muscle and learn how to perform endurance training really well is going in completely two separate directions, which I don't think is going to allow you to do either very well. Can you run and be a big person? Absolutely. I've trained John Clark, who is Britain's strongest man, to being able to run 48 marathons in 48 days in 48 UK counties. But it's not like he was an excellent runner and he lost a ton of muscle mass. So just understand that if you are going after this hybrid model, you have to be really conscious of running and potentially creating injuries, and very conscious and just accept that you're not going to be as jacked as you were before. The third risk is that power to weight events suffer. And this is where a lot of people say, well, I don't want to do strength training with my endurance training because I don't want to get big, because I don't want to get slow. When I get big, I get slow, and I need to be light. Well, couple of things. Even some of the most jacked, dedicated bodybuilders in the world only gain about 1 to 2 pounds of muscle per year, and that's when all they're doing is dedicated bodybuilding training. Us endurance athletes, it's almost going to be impossible for us to put on muscle while we're doing our endurance training, so don't really worry about that. The second thing is, let's say you're a freak of nature who can put on muscle really easily with strength training. Well, there aren't really too many events in endurance races that being super light actually helps. When we look at triathlon, it's actually been shown that body weight really has no outcome and no relation to your total race time. Body composition does, so being more muscular than you are fat, which strength training really helps for, is actually going to increase your likelihood of having a good race. My personal PBs in Ironman, half Ironman, and sprint races, all of which are thought to be focused on just being really super light, were actually when I was about 10 pounds heavier than I thought that I should be, because holding that extra weight kept me a little bit healthier and more durable. One of the only places that this is really legitimately a factor is if you're doing a ton of climbing. If you are a Tour de France rider and you're doing nothing but climbing in the mountains, then it might help, but I can also tell you that some of the fastest people in my province, when I would go toe to toe with them sprinting, on flats, on climbs, some of the biggest guys out there were some of the strongest cyclists because they were healthy, because they were durable. So I really just wouldn't worry about it. You're splitting hairs. At the level of being a Tour de France contender and a climber, that's where power to weight really matters. For us amateur triathletes, it's a bad excuse if you're saying that you don't want your power to weight ratio to suffer. The fourth risk and drawback of including strength training into your endurance training is actually getting injured while you are doing that training. This is very legitimate, and this is where I think there is a major risk to doing strength training if all you do is lump that strength training on top of your endurance training without making an endurance sport specific. Typical strength training is very risky. There's a lot of torn rotator cuffs, a lot of torn pecs, a lot of torn quads and glutes. Typical strength training is brutal. It's meant to break down your body and be extremely ballistic. So when I see people that are just doing normal strength training for their endurance training, I know that it's A, not going to benefit them nearly as much. B, they're not going to get much out of that traditional strength training because they're not going to be able to build themselves up as they would if they weren't an endurance athlete. And then C, there's a high likelihood that they could experience injury. Of course, there are obvious exceptions with people who never get injured, but typical strength training is very injurious. The entire reason that I took up triathlon in the very first place was because in my 20s, I thought I was trying to be a bodybuilder, and I got injured. I tore my shoulder so badly that I couldn't lift a weight at all. I couldn't lift a 20-pound weight. So I had to start walking on the treadmill at the gym, and then that got boring. So then I went on the bike the next day, and then that got boring. So then I kept intermixing, go on the treadmill one day, bike the next day, and then swim the next day. And it was just because I got injured lifting. Finally, the fifth risk or drawback of including strength training in your endurance training is that people think that it takes more time. As we talked about in the science section of this complete guide, it actually doesn't really help for you to just lump strength training on top of your endurance training. You're going to get the most benefit if you replace some of your endurance training with strength training. In addition to that, I am a big believer, as you'll see in a couple of sections, in doing kettlebell training. One of the big reasons for that is you can outfit your house with about $200 worth of kettlebell training and be set up with equipment for probably 2 years. You're going to be able to do your strength training at home so you don't have to drive to the gym, log in, check in, wait for people on machines, wait for your turn, shower, get home. You can do it in and out in a 30-minute session that start to finish, from going into the gym to breaking everything down, is 35 minutes of your time. That's it. And if you're incorporating it into your triathlon or running or cycling or swim run or duathlon training plan properly, you're actually replacing some of your endurance training with the strength training so that you're not actually adding on any more time. Hey Motivator, thank you for watching this clip of talking about the risks associated with strength training for endurance athletes. If you want our complete guide to strength training for endurance athletes, the full video where we talk about every one of these sections is linked right up here. And in that video, we talk about what this pie chart actually means and how you can apply it to your strength training within your training plan. If you want other clips where we talk about the other concepts in this complete guide, you can see the playlist right over here. And if you found this video helpful, hit the subscribe button below. Later, Motivators.